Welcome, everybody, to the EdGate Powers Education podcast. I'm excited today. We're talking a little bit about technology in EdTech and education. And with me is Ashli. She's from Edmentum. She has about 20 years experience in curriculum alignment and management and working with standards. And I'm super excited to have her on the podcast. Ashli, could you give us an intro?
Absolutely. So I am Ashli Denton. I am the catalog manager over at Edmentum, and I manage the standards and alignments team. I've been in standards alignments, like Rich said, for about 20 years now. Interesting, I remember years and years ago getting a message from my boss at the time. I kind of just stumbled into standards and alignments. I had decided to stay home um, and got an opportunity to contract. And I thought I was going to be creating curriculum. And my very first assignment as a contractor was to do an alignment. And I said, "What is this?" And she explained it to me, and I said, "Okay." So that's what I ended up doing. But I remember getting a message from her a couple years into contracting for the company, and at that time. I was with ETS, which I was with their item bank, and it got bought out several times and moved around. But she sent an article to me that said, can you imagine, it was an article that said, can you imagine if the United States was to have one set of standards? And I said, that'll never happen. And so, of course, several years later, we had Common Core, and then we've changed. And so I realized I'll never be without a job because states are so incredibly, individualized. And so they have changed their standards for us over and over and over and kept us busy in the world of standards and alignments. And so I'm excited to have this conversation with you today, Rich, of just about technology and how we're using it to do our jobs more efficiently, because that's the name of the game right now in the world of ed tech.
If we start there with CTE and how you're deploying that, were there some considerations or thoughts of how technology can enable those solutions for Edmentum?
So, what's interesting is we were working with CTE for a good long while, and now that they have this new product that they're actually deploying, like you said, we have a specialized person that's kind of taken over just CTE because we handle this. We still handle all the standards for all the states. So we've developed, one of the things we've done on our team is developed a state tracker for, we have a state tracker for all of the states that we spend a good bit of our week keeping up with everything that's going on in the world of standards. We had CTE on that tracker, but we found that, of course, I used to work with CTE for years and years ago at Instructure. I helped monitor a lot of the states as a contractor at the time. So monitor a lot of different states. They actually did not monitor all of the states and all of what was going on in CTE. They actually only monitored those that they had customers for, or there was a need there. So for our purposes here, we were monitoring all 50, but there's so many, CTE, you go in and there's clusters, they change in different order. So it's not like, oh, we're doing, except for maybe Florida, they do their CTE standards every single year and release a new set. But for a lot of the different states, it's, culinary arts is updating, but then the next month ag is updating, or a certain aspect of ag. So we developed a CTE tracker that is just devoted to CTE. So we are maintaining that with the help of contractors now, and that actually breaks it down instead of just being at the state level, which is how we were previously looking at it. We're actually getting into the different pathways, the clusters. When are they updating? When are they changing? What's going on? So that's primarily my role, is monitoring the whole standards and alignments team here in catalog operations, and I don't get too much into the development of the courses. We use a tool called Distill to monitor all the different websites that we use. We're also using, when we're experimenting with a lot of AI to be able to produce alignment documentation that is predictive for CTE, and trying to, feel out what is the desire for CTE alignment documentation as these courses deploy. Does everybody want everything right away, or do we just kind of feel it out and not spend so much time devoted to CTE alignment documentation just yet? So we're kind of just feeling all that out because these courses have just recently started to roll out.
If we're talking about standards more specifically and how people are how they're starting to figure out the management, because as you say, they continue to change. I know from our perspective, EdGate, has a very large database, and I think it's 1 in 7 um, uh, standards within our database is education, where the other 6 would be CTE. That's kind of a rough number, which is, pretty hefty when you're talking about, 6 million standards. That's a lot of CTE
It
standards.
is.
Um, and trying to figure out how to manage through those. And they're all so different, as you said.
One of the things that's interesting is we have a talk track that we're developing for our sales team as they, take these new courses out. And one of the things we talk about is that CTE will likely have supplemental materials that are required in order to meet all of the standards. You're likely not going to be able to build an online course that fully meets CTE standards, because it's going to involve some sort of get out there and get your hands in it and get involved in it. So we talk about that we can only do so much with an online course to get someone CTE certified, without the teachers supplementing with maybe an apprenticeship or some kind of capstone type course, that because a lot of the pathways end with a capstone course, where they need to do some sort of an internship or something like that.
Yeah.
And so I think CTE standards are just the fact that we have an entirely separate tracker, like you just said, to monitor CTE standards shows just how, and every company, is trying to figure out how do we deal with all of these CTE, standards and courses and just the expertise, like who's going to develop these courses that has an expertise in all of these different areas. You can't have 100 different SMEs writing all these different courses. You've got to figure out, okay, we're going to go with a vendor. This is how we're going to get these courses developed. And then same thing for standards. We have a very small team, here at Edmentum for standards and alignments. We use contractors, but we couldn't possibly find contractors that have expertise in all of these standards. So there has to be another way around developing a solution for CTE, and that is likely, incorporating AI. I actually read the article that was in EdWeek recently that Gina Falk from EdGate had commented on about AI, and we were like, our whole team read it, and we were like, yes, that is exactly what we're talking about. And that is that while AI is helpful, standards and alignments work and producing that documentation, even in the predictive realm, is still very subjective. You can't cut the human out of the loop. If you were to just publish what AI puts out, it would be, error ridden, really. It comes with errors. It will align stuff that doesn't that doesn't necessarily meet the standard, that was just trying to word match, and or doesn't even closely fully meet the standard. And then it also will just miss things, that we could as a human go in and say, oh, no, this is right. It couldn't get into every nook and cranny of the course and find the coverage that was necessary. So AI has been something, I think, similar to EdGate, at least the article that we read, that we're all trying to use to help improve our efficiency, but it comes with its limitations.
In regards, by the way, have you guys ever used or do you use Exact? Is that
Yes, and we use
okay?
Exact. That's one of the tools we utilize for our Apex courses. That's where our Apex courses, and not our courseware, but our Apex courses are all in EdGate, and so we utilize. We actually primarily use it more for a direct alignment tool. So as the courses are developed and we've reviewed the scope and sequence and reviewed all the alignments, then we go into the Exact path tool, load the course in, and then perform the direct alignment with the standards that we know that align. And then customers and clients, as well as salespeople, are able to pull their own reports from our customer reporting tool that uses Exact. It's got a link through that so they can pull their own reports.
And
So we
do you use
love that. Is our favorite alignment tool as well. Like, we
good.
have used a bunch of different type of tools, and we liked it before, all of the improvements, but we like it even more now, that it's had all of the most recent improvements. It's just easy to navigate, and it makes so much sense to us. Even when you go in and you're aligning like the concepts to the standards, and then you let it do a predictive report from there. Um, it is our favorite alignment tool when we get to use it. We don't get to use it too much because we do a lot with courseware, but every now and then, like, there's some new Apex courses coming out just last week and this week, and so we'll get to go into the Exact tool and use it.
And within Exact, do you also use the gap tool?
Yes, like for where it suggests gap fillers. Is that what you're saying? Or
Correct. So, you could say, well, we have everything set for Texas, but we want to go into California. What's the gap in
yes,
the course? And it gives you percentages and some, how to fill it and how to change it so you can meet the requirements.
yes. Yeah, we used to use we used to use the Exact tool. I mean, this was before the tool change, but we used to use it for all of that all the time because my whole team was legacy Apex,
Okay.
and so that was our only tool, and that was all we used. And of course, we were only doing Apex courses at the time. But then the companies, when they merged, we took over all of the alignments for courseware as well. And so, like I said, it's been a bit since we've gotten to do a whole lot, because I think they're moving more and more towards courseware being the platform that we use. But we tell them all the time, use EdGate, because they started using you guys a lot more for when we need state approvals done and things like that, to have that third-party validation, because the process has just been much smoother than other experiences we have. I'll just say that.
If you could wave a magic wand as someone who does alignments and manages standards, to have a tool do something, what would that be? What would be the most helpful to you and your team?
Well, I think, the tools that we're experimenting with and developing now in our company are getting there to be the magic wand that we would want so much. And that would be that when we ran it through the system, ran a set of standards through the system against a course, that it would come back primarily aligned, and we could just do a small amount of cleanup and publish the alignment documentation, because we have alignment documentation to complete for days and days and days, that needs to be done. I think that would be my magic wand, would just even to be 75% there when we ran it through a tool, would be fantastic. And we just find that for the most part, now with EdGate, the exact tool, it does work if you take the time to put in the right concepts, and you're picky about what you're choosing to align to the content, and then you run it through and you get alignments back. But with our tools that we're experimenting with, it's still pretty far off. And so we just spend a good bit of time questioning, would this been faster to just do it ourselves from the beginning? Or was this worthwhile to run it through this tool and get the results that we got? But I really appreciate transparency in alignment documentation. And so I used to work for a company where it was just common practice to not show gaps in alignment documentation, to only show customers what was aligned. And I can see where where that thought process, was coming from. But I just find that we are much more transparent on the Edmentum side. They always, they're going to show you what's aligned. They're going to show you what is gaps to the customer. We don't necessarily, of course, get into all of our internal notes where we, are really getting nitty gritty and picking the course apart. They don't see that part, but we share what the gaps are. And I think that provides teachers and decision makers the right information that they need to move forward with making decisions, and what they need to use to supplement. And I don't think that's where AI is, and technology is really lacking, is that it can show the gaps, but it doesn't provide any context of, this is what you might be able to, this is partially covered. We don't get that type of information from any AI, and that's something we do subjectively, of course, but we do it by hand, and that is going through alignments and then making notes. Those internal notes are so valuable for content development, as we pass stuff on to them so that they know what actually needs to still be covered in this alignment documentation. AI doesn't give you a whole lot of context. For instance, this is another probably magic wand thing, but to run a course against, or a set of standards against multiple courses, this is like somebody's dream, dream thing, and be able to find out where is all the best content in that we have available in our library to create this course. Because we spend a lot of time doing that by hand, going in, digging in, looking for things. Of course, we know where a lot of things are just because of legacy knowledge. But if something were to happen to our team and we weren't here, that would be a huge learning curve, for somebody.
Yeah.
So
it's like a reverse lookup model, right?
Yes, exactly. Right.
Okay.
I know that the exact tool does that by activity, and I think you can run it against multiple courses. I've done that before, a set of standards against multiple courses, and it will kind of show you where things align. So things like that are super helpful. I think just the additional notes and context behind what AI was thinking, because obviously it's a piece of it's a machine technology, a machine reader, but we would love to be able to have some sort of additional explanation with these reports that are spitting out. Yes, they spit out instantly, but we have to do a lot of work to get them where they need to be.
Got it. Yeah. It's amazing. We can talk about some of these things today, that may be theoretical, but it's so close with the technology that's available to make things a reality. We're very fortunate, right? We can have these wishes, and probably in a year or two, a lot of these things do come true, right? And if we're looking at the other side of it, you're looking at the administrators and the districts and the information that comes to you regarding the standards. That's, to me, there's that's one of the biggest gaps. Like you talk about building tools to figure out how to pull standards in. Like, what's the magic wand there? How can we make that process better through utilizing technology to simplify what you do?
Yeah, I think you know, something like our AI tool, like you said, it's getting very close to being able to do more and more and more like that. And we have people over here working super hard on what we have found is that um, AI, at least what we're experimenting with, doesn't seem to have the ability to learn from itself. And so we would love to be able to we've said several times, and we've asked technology several times, is there a way that we can load in an alignment report, for instance, for Common Core? Of course, a lot of states are getting away from that, but if we were to load in something for Common Core, a national set of standards, could an alignment system learn from what we did and then apply it to other cases? Um, and so, you know, they've kind of explain, oh, well, we can put more stuff in the prompts for the AI so that it you know, understands more. But we found the more we put into prompts in the AI, it just provides more words for it to try and match, and we end up getting more incorrect alignments when we provide additional prompts. Like, for instance, Florida has clarification statements in all of their standards, which are super helpful for aligning curriculum. However, the the clarification statements are not included in the actual standards. So we have we loaded into our system, you know, a set of Algebra 1 standards that included the clarification statements to see if that would you know, we experimented with to see if that would help AI to improve and to get better with its alignments. And instead, it went the opposite direction. It gave it more words, it gave it more to read, and it provided a bunch of additional matches that were not correct. So it was kind of our hypotheses that it was going to improve, and we found out, you know, through trial and error. Thankfully, our company provided us like a time to explore a few ideas that we had. None of them really worked out, but you know, even in the failing, we learned something about technology, at least in how its current state. And like you said, I just think it's changing so fast. We work in an ed tech company. Um, I wouldn't have even imagined. I've been in a standards and alignments now for 20 years. And so I would not even have imagined 20 years ago, when all we used was Excel. And, you know, I had all these Excel documents up with standards, and I had Excel up with content, you know, is that we would be in this place now where we do have an option to run it through a system that spits out possible alignments. So we're getting there, but having AI be able to learn from itself, which, you know, you would think that that's what it would do, is just, you know, artificial intelligence would continue to get smarter. And I think it is, but I don't know if that's, and this is above my pay grade, but I don't know if it's, you know, a future um, you know, a new platform, a new an update to the AI system that we're using. You know, I don't know what it will eventually take to improve, but I do believe it's coming. You know, I believe we're headed in the right direction.
I do too. I mean, you know, you just kind of historically looking at, you know, how technology has reshaped our lives, you know, just in, you know, I look, you know, my 57 years from telephone technology, you know, and what's happened in automotively and in other places that, you know, things are disrupted. People get scared of those changes, and then people learn to accept it. And then that technology, you know, advances even further. And that's, you know, while sometimes people are fearful of some dystopian future where technology is going to take over our lives, I think the more realistic view is that it's going to get better, and we're going to figure out ways to harness it to do things quicker and better and faster. And that's a cool positive thing, especially in education, because there's, I look at where the gaps are. We've kind of created this very challenging space with every state having their own set of standards and CTEs, and
Hmm.
independence is great, but for ed tech companies, it's a bear to manage,
It
right?
is.
Um, so, looking at these magic wand things and trying to figure out how do we meet states where they are? How can we continue to sell them the products that we make and do it effectively, considering the fact that it's 50 different fiefdoms, and they have all these sets of rules and regulations and so forth. Is it really challenging for your? I don't know who you directly connect with there, but is like, do you guys connect with the sales team and like to get feedback, to make adjustments to some of the alignments that you're doing, or how does the communication go internally, and what does that sound like?
Yeah, so it's honestly rare that we hear back too much from sales. The number one thing we hear is that they need more alignment documentation done for more states, more courses. We have so many courses, so many states, so much changing so fast. And so the speed in which they need alignments done is truly, just faster than we can possibly crank out. Really, and we have two different types of alignment documentation that we've come up with for in the last 6 months, because we really started doing more work with AI. We have predictive alignment reports, and then we have certified alignment reports. And so I'm interested to see, as these start kind of filtering their way through sales, if we will, and we have this, of course, explained on our talk track of what predictive is, which is it has been run through an AI system, but it has had a human review, and it's a succinct review. It is not near as much time as we would spend creating certified alignment documentation. But then certified alignment documentation means, a human did it from start to finish. And so I'm interested to see if we will start to hear feedback of, I want a certified report. I don't want a predictive report, or if we'll hear very much back from the field. The predictive alignment reports have allowed us to get forth a whole lot more alignment documentation. And of course, we do that for states and for deals that maybe are not super high priority, or there's just not a lot of revenue going on in that particular area. Um, or there's just that particular business case meets the need for a predictive report. But the certified reports are often used. One, they're used for content development. They're used for any customer or white glove situation where we're like, no, this has to be, top notch. And for certified reports, we typically don't um, hear back very often. But I'm interested. I think we may start to hear. I'll be interested to see if we start to hear back on predictive reports where someone says, I've read what predictive reports are. I'll be honest, Rich, I think that the predictive reports will still have some errors in them, because our goal in reviewing them is to remove the egregious, and to take out anything that doesn't work very well. But um, our goal is so that someone looks at a predictive report and says, um, and doesn't say, where in the world did someone think this was a good idea? Or why in the world did someone think this was a good idea to put this with this? So that's our goal. But at the same time, we only have a short period of time to review these predictive reports. And it's always under a tight deadline. And so we're positive that they're going to go forward. And we put that disclaimer out there, hey, these are predictive reports. Everybody understands that with AI, I believe this is a common understanding, is that with AI, you're not going to necessarily get things that you're not occasionally like, because I think that that's kind of that happens if you ever have used ChatGPT or whatever. You occasionally get an answer that you're like, okay, you tried with that one, but that was not what we were looking for. Yeah, so I'm interested to see, what we hear back. Occasionally, we do hear back about the actual gaps, and they want those to be filled. Now, that's not our team, that's going to actually do the filling of them, but that may be more of the feedback we hear is we don't like that this course has so many gaps. And unfortunately, that's not, our burden to bear on our team. We can't really do much about that, but we can work with CD and say, hey, that's where we do step in and say, hey, these are other courses that you could use, these places and other courses that you could use to fill gaps. So.
Yep. No, that's fantastic. There's just so much there. I mean, when I think about the technology and AI is a component. I know internally we talk about um, advanced technologies as a broader scope thing because it encompasses things like analytics and natural language processing, machine learning. And advanced text analysis. There's like multiple components to what we try to apply to make things better. So it's a little bit more comprehensive, and some of that's tech speak, and I know that's not your bailiwick necessarily, but in the uh, kind of the ideal and forging ahead, as you were saying, trying to do some of this stuff. There are better ways. There are ways to improve it, and I know that our tech team and the folks that we have working on, how do we take the patented technologies that we have on the alignment stuff and then advance it so that it can be done better because some of the struggle has been, well, the human has to be involved in so much. And you said at the very beginning, you can only have so many SMEs walking around doing things. And then you're like, geez, I could hire 100 people. We have hundreds of clients and we can't have hundreds of SMEs. It's just not cost effective. No one will pay for it. So how do we kind of measure it out and find that sweet spot where technology can get us far enough and then the gap becomes smaller and smaller over time so the SMEs can produce more and more. I think kind of from a big picture standpoint, that's some of the stuff that we're trying to do. Does that resonate with you as well in like trying to narrowing that gap?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think I mean, our team actually has gotten, smaller over the years, and that's unfortunately the work has just grown, so our work has grown, our team has gotten smaller in the last 5 or 6 years, just with different things that have gone on with the company. And so as we have just a small team, it is our number one sort of mountain to climb is to figure out how can we do this more efficiently with a smaller team, which seems crazy because we've actually gained efficiencies over the years by implementing different ways that we can do this because we cannot hire, a bunch of different people. We don't have the ability to, although it would be nice to have 100 SMEs walking around, and just grab the one you need when you need it. That's not a reality. And so the whole point of kind of seeking out AI and tools and vendors has been to scale. That's the word of choice for sure, is how do we do more with less bodies. And I think there's been a big question for that we've had to try and tackle from ELT, and that is, why does it take so long to do an alignment report with a human? And I think that's because we're running into roadblocks of, oh, I need to search content. There's not really a great way to search it right now. So I'm having to kind of manually go through courses and look for what I am needing. And then then, so the use of AI has almost become like it truly has become a much better search feature for us. And that's something I think that has been really a game changer. And then, we've worked with, we have an amazing, content engineering team, and they have come up with, ways that we can download our template for an alignment documentation, and it's already populated with all of the standards. Everything is all set up. It looks like, it's got a macro that creates customer facing documentation. And it makes me happy every single time I download it, because I'm like, yes, we needed this 10 years ago, but like, I haven't gotten tired of it, because it's like the best tool to be able to open up an alignment documentation. It's ready to go, because for years we copy pasted standards, into an Excel if we didn't necessarily already have that, if we didn't already have that set into our database where we download standards. We would have to do them ourselves. For instance, CTE, that's actually the number one subject that where we import our standards from doesn't have all of the standard sets we need. They have a good bit of them, but a lot of times they don't have them all. And so still to this day, when we don't have a standard set we need, we have to import it or import it manually. And so that's copy pasting every single standard we can put it into our system now and then download the template. But one way or another, it's got to either go in the template and it goes in piece by piece, or it goes in through, through our importing system, but we have to actually manually put those standards in one at a time. So working with content engineering, they have suggested, oh, well, we can probably run that PDF through AI and pull those standards out. But even then, we run it through AI and it's missing words, and we have to have all the standards right. So that's one of the drawbacks still of AIs. We've talked about it so much today. It's getting there, but you were hoping so badly to run that PDF through AI and let it spit out all your standards, and instead it skipped a few standards. It skipped a few words in standards, and we can't have that on alignment reports. So it tried to be helpful, but it just wasn't quite to the point that we needed it to be. So yeah, I think being able to scale with a smaller team is probably our number one challenge. And I think it's a lot of companies' challenges right now, whether it be in standards alignments or content development or whatever area it is in ed tech. We're all trying to do more with such a variety of desires from different states, requirements, even states, that are districtly decided. So you've got local decisions, and maybe you're working with one particular district, and then they asked for it different than what the at-large state asked for. That can be, there's just a lot of challenges, but that's definitely our number one challenge is figuring out how do we do more. And the answer has been, it's not a complete answer yet, but the answer has been incorporating technology to do as many things that we can give up, and that technology can do well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And from a competitive standpoint, or other ed tech companies that are the same ilk as Edmentum, do you see that they're doing similar things, that they're kind of working with their teams and trying to build these efficiencies and building internal tools to try to meet the requirements that are out there? Or
I think so. I think this is, and actually it was interesting. We just did a standards and alignments showcase with one of our ELT members, and well, actually with several of our ELT members, and got to kind of show off what we were doing on our team. And the one of the members said that they had actually been out, they're able to actually go talk to different companies, and they're out there in the field where they can rub shoulders with decision makers and other ELT members at other companies, and they ask them, hey, what is AI, what's going on with AI at your company, or what are you guys doing with technology? And some of the shared practices she shared with us was that everyone said, we're trying to use technology to improve our efficiency, but we're not quite there yet. That was kind of the general consensus. So I feel like we're in good company with a lot of different companies of just really navigating how we can improve our processes. And everyone had the idea, I believe, or at least from the top, I believe the idea is probably is like, we can get AI to do it. We can get AI to do everything. And then quickly found out, that's not going to work. But we can definitely use AI and use technology to improve our processes. Of course, it is, a tool that you can't deny is truly amazing and is growing by the day in what it can do. But at the same time, so it's not something that I don't think it's something any company can ignore. If they're ignoring it, they're probably far behind where, things need to be right now. But it's just something that I think, is probably a growth feature at most companies, but also a pain point. It's something that everyone's just figuring out right now. How can we use this? And realizing that it's not going to take over the human decision makers. It can't completely take over it. Like you said earlier, there's going to need to be some guardrails and some safeguards that we put in place so that humans can still sort of guide the data that's coming out of all of the technology.
The interesting thing for me and looking at this is like Edmentum has some scale. You're a bigger company, you're PE backed, you have, resources, but a smaller company like Newsomatic has to be a little bit more nimble. If I'm an edtech startup today, like if I think back to career path, if I had to come into this field today and I had to look at, oh my gosh, to sell to 50 states, I have to do 50 sets of alignments with all these CTE standards. How do I do it? I mean,
right?
It's like without deploying technology, how do they survive as, a $1 million or $2 million company?
Sure. The number one best practice is, and it's part of our AI, company handbook now, is just keeping humans in the loop. That even in a small company, I don't think that you can't get to the point where there's a trust in what came out of AI so much so that you wouldn't put your hands on it before you put it out the door to customers, because there should be a healthy fear that, what comes out of technology hasn't been able to review the nuances of interpretation, of, analysis of different standards and content, and it should definitely have somebody look at it. And then learning to scale, I think, with contractors, vendors. I mean, lots of companies do that, but I think and it's tough to find, people that will stick around and be consistent. It's just like, I think if you were to start up a restaurant, they say the number one thing for a good restaurant is always making consistent food that's delicious over and over and over again, and not to drop the quality of the food. And so when you're looking for vendors in an ed tech company, you're looking for someone who's going to keep putting out consistent work, and not try and get so fast that they drop the quality over time. So working with great people, is obviously super important. with making educational decisions, people who know, what they're talking about, and then combine that with the use of technology. Those two things marry together beautifully when you combine them just right.
It's been wonderful chatting with you. I wouldn't mind staying for another hour, but I know you
Oh,
got
I
things to do.
understand. We got things to do.
Um,
Well,
so
thank you, Rich. It was great speaking with you.